Well, good morning, Northlands Church, and to our online community. So good to be with you today. In this morning's devotion, I want to just pick up from where we left off yesterday. We were talking about the two things that we want in a storm. Yesterday, I talked about the first thing. We want security. We want to know that everything is going to be okay, and we talked about how we find security in the storms. Today, I want to talk about how we find clarity in the storm. The reason these two things matter, and perhaps you've said this in some form or fashion over the last several months as we've navigated through this COVID season, security is begging the question of, is everything going to be okay? Clarity is asking, well, really two things. It's saying, man, what in the world is going on? Or another way of maybe saying it is, what am I supposed to do? Storms produce confusion and they produce uncertainty. And so naturally, we long for security and clarity. We want to know that everything's going to be okay. And in the storms, when it's confusing, we want to know, what am I supposed to do? We're facing significant problems right now, aren't we? Whether it's our health or our finances, our jobs, honestly, managing fear and anxiety and doubt. How do we push those aside so we can operate on a daily basis? And we're faced with difficult decisions and conversations regularly, aren't we? It seems like life is already hard enough, but in a crisis, it seems like all of these problems are just vamped up. They feel far more stronger and difficult than usual, and they're happening more frequently. So we need to know what to do. I also just want to recognize that when we're faced with making hard decisions on a daily basis, this drains us emotionally, physically, mentally, even spiritually. And so for me, the reason I want to talk about clarity today, and we're going to talk about how we use our values to bring clarity on what we should do, is because I want to take some of the weight off of us mentally and emotionally. It's always difficult when you're faced with multiple problems and you feel exhausted at the end of the day because you've had to face significant, again, financial, career and job and work, what we're doing with the kids with school. All of these problems and challenges can weigh on us. So I'm hoping to lift the weight off of us, and I believe that weight comes off when we have a clarity about what we should do. But the reason values are so important is because values almost create an autopilot. Values almost determine the decisions for you. When you're faced with 5 or 6 hard decisions or hard conversations, values help make those decisions quickly. It might not make them more comfortable, but it makes them more clear. We still have to make very hard decisions, but we're not continually looking at all the problems from every angle, weighing down. It's taking us hours and hours. What should we do? When we know our values, it helps us make the decision quickly, even if it's difficult, and I'll explain why. Let's talk about the definition of values for a moment. This is how I would say it. Values are the fundamental beliefs that guide and motivate our actions and our attitudes. They help us determine who we are and what is most important to us. When we're secure and clear about who we are and what is most important to us, our values begin to form. If you're saying, man, I want my kids to be kind, or I want them to be merciful, I want them to be generous, those are things that are important to you, that if your kids lost those attributes, those values in their life, something about that would feel like a significant loss. And so when we ask the question, what's most important to me that I want to instill in my children, that I want to have present in my marriage, those are our values, and they make us us. Now, let's talk a little bit about how we find our values. And I said it this way in my message on Sunday. When you look at your values, all you're focusing on are two things: who and do. Who and do. We're trying to figure out what to do with all of these problems, and we want to take some of the exhaustive weight of making the hard decisions off of our shoulders. And so what we need to start with is who. Before we think about the action steps that we need to take towards these problems, we start with who. When I say, what am I supposed to do? Before the do, there's an I. What am I supposed to do? When I've determined who I am, that automatically begins to tell me what I'm called to do. I used some analogies on Sunday, but if I'm an electrician, I am going to do electrical work. If I'm a plumber, I'm going to do plumbing. If I'm a pilot, I fly planes. I don't drive taxi cabs. So asking the question, what are the things that are most important to me? And how would I identify myself? What are the things that I value? These values make up you, and they automatically start narrowing down the decision making. Because let's think about it for a minute. If you're a generous person and you have to go right or left, and if you go off to the left, it's not what the generous person would do. It would be maybe conceived of, man, people might think that I'm stingy, or it's not very generous. I feel like I'm kind of hoarding away, thinking only about myself. And so what does that do? It means that you have to go right. It doesn't mean that walking right is going to be any easier. It just means that you once had two choices and now you only have one option. See, right now our values are automatically making the decisions for us. And that's the second thing. We talk about the who and the do. I love how Craig Groeschel says this when he talks about values. He says, values determine our behaviors. They guide and motivate our actions and our attitudes. I want to bring it into the context, though, of facing a storm. And here's what I would say, as we've talked about these problems in crisis, when the rules are always changing, which they are, when circumstances are high pressure, which we are feeling the high pressure, and the answer of what should I do is not exactly clear. Values are what make the decisions for us. Again, your options begin to narrow down when you're wondering, hey, what am I supposed to do when you say, this is who I am? We start with, this is who I am, and our values then dictate the behavior. Sometimes if you look at all your problems, when you weigh out all the different options, really there's only one option in each of those problem categories. You're saying, well, I can't do that because that's not what a kind person would do. Or that's not what a loving person would do. That's not what a merciful person would do. I want to investigate our values because I really do believe they help hold us secure. More than asking the question, what are we supposed to do during the storm? I think a better question is to ask, Lord, who have you created me to be during and after this storm? Tomorrow, I want to talk about your values. I want to help you maybe kind of filter through what your values should be. And I want you to use those values in this season. With that, blessings.